Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Two Wizards and a Mic, where a couple of old dudes talk about D&D and hopefully provide you with some kind of wisdom where your games will be better, cooler, awesomer, and just plain fun. Because, as we all know, that's what this game is about. It's a game. I'm
Yeah,
Shane,
and I am Andrew.
and this week I would like to hear about the latest on the Kickstarter.
All right, so we've made more progress on the art. There is basically the layout is almost completely finished. He's just waiting for the last few art pieces. The final edit I'm doing, actually, I should be finished tonight.
Nice.
So I believe the artist is now down to, I think we've got 10 images to go. So that's really good. There's a few that need to be colored, but 10 images haven't been started yet. So Travis, the artist, has done so much work the last month, especially. So we're ahead of schedule, which is good. You can follow us on Discord. I'll put the link below, and you can see examples of pages from the book. And you can still pre-order this book, Monsters of the Dungeon, which is the last book in our monster series, which will give you over 600 monsters now in the whole series.
Nice.
And yeah, it's I think it's one of our best, if not our best.
Well, the layouts over the series have gotten cooler and nicer, and there's just
Mhm.
the artwork has evolved. Like, there's all kinds of cool things going on, but the consistency is there as well. Like, there's definitely been like a for each book. The layout might be slightly different from this one to the next one to the next one, but as you and I have talked about before, like the first couple were just like books about monsters being there, but then there was the storylines that were kind of there, and then the last few books have been like these. It's a book with a story inside of it about why these creatures are doing what they're doing. So I'm and I don't know what the story is for the book that's coming out. So don't think anybody that I know anything more than you. I am kept in the dark, just like every other supporter of the Kickstarter. Um, but yeah, I mean, and I know the quality is going to be awesome anyway. So who
Well, I should
cares?
mention too, when we do show things that are coming from the book, most of the really cool stuff I don't show. Because I like to have that be a surprise when the book comes out. So we do show some of it. Like there's an amazing illustration Travis did of the paladin falling through a dungeon floor with these flying blabberblub aberration creatures. So there are some spectacular illustrations we've highlighted, but a lot of the really, I think, the ones that are the best, we actually hold on to those and keep those under wraps until the book is ready.
Nice. Yeah, because there's also the like the inspiration. I mean, I've asked you this before, but where Travis basically said you kind of give an idea of what's going on, then he kind of gives you an idea of what he thinks, and usually you're like, oh yeah, that's totally it. But there's also some of the other things where he's taken inspiration, I think, from your description of our games. Am I right on that?
Um, from our particular group's games,
Yeah.
um, no, we haven't talked about that too much. There's a few illustrations that are connected to that, but most of those actually were for other books, not for the
Really?
monster series. Yeah, there's one illustration in the Underworld book that is of your one of your adventuring parties at the back of the book with with Raven with that giant spider in the background.
Yep.
But no, we haven't really done that yet. And part of the reason is that our plan all along was to create all the monster books and then to create a world that you can put them in. So next we're going to make the mirror book. And then
Nice.
after that's done, then we're going to start making adventures. And hopefully we can make lots of those.
Yeah, that actually I'm kind of excited to try my hand at making one because I will need guidance and all kinds of things, but that's definitely in my realm of experience and and it's fun too. So look forward to that, everybody. Whatever adventure I create and you play, I will make sure you die
Mhm.
several times over. Or something along those lines. Um, so today's topic is kind of one that I particularly enjoy because it's one of those elements of the game that makes things absolutely flow and make it fun and unpredictable. And of course, we're talking about flawed PCs are fun. So, what is a flawed PC? What do people think of? They think of just a little bit of flaws, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, column A, column B, or are we talking about playing a character as looking at a flaw and being like, okay, that's totally what my character's all about. That is the coolest thing I've got in this character, and
Mhm.
I'm going to ride that hard. So, what's sort of your feeling?
Well, overall, these are imperfections that, it's fun to have a story that's grounded in some reality too. So if your character is more realistic, it's often more interesting, and it's a lot more fun for role playing if you have a flaw. It's
Yeah,
it's part of it is subjective because maybe a flaw to you is not a flaw to somebody else. Um,
exactly.
but we're going to look at some examples of flaw. If you're flawed in your ability scores, if you just didn't roll that well, what could happen? And then after that, we'll look at some more different kinds of flaws, which are actually built into the fifth edition system. It's not a
Right,
perfect system. I think it is the best for combat and for moving the game along. But one of the things I do like is the flaws and ideals and bonds that are built into the game. But the first flaws we're going to look at is what happens if you roll poorly, and can that end up being fun, right? And
exactly.
I would say it's a lot of fun actually. If you have low strength, so what happens? Well, you can get pushed around. You can't open a stuck door. Maybe the rest of the party is like, "Come on, come on!" Um, you're prisoners, and you can't break free of a grapple or bonds, right? Maybe you can't climb up something. You're not strong enough to do it. You slip back down, or you can't jump high enough or long enough, so you end up falling. Or there's lots of things that could happen. Maybe you can't tip something over, right? Um, all of this could be quite comical, and it could be game changing as well.
Oh, exactly. Because if you can't get through a door for whatever reason, um, that's a problem. But especially things like, and I've had characters that had this problem where the character was grappled by some creature, and
Mhm.
then boom, suddenly the character's either unconscious or is thrown against something and is unable to, like, yeah, I mean, and not to mention it distracts the other players. They're like, uh,
Mhm.
if unless they're like really embroiled in some sort of close combat, uh, most players will say, "Oh my god, we've got to help character
Right.
X. Let's get over there,"
Right. Yeah.
which distracts them, and suddenly the DM can be like, "Well, you guys are supposed to be doing this, and then that weakling over there has just caused you guys to go over that side of the room, and now here's a gelatinous cube coming out of nowhere."
Yeah. Yeah. So it can be interesting, and interesting to have, like, the game really is based on heroes, and to have a hero who is not physically strong, that's kind of interesting. Um, what happens with low dexterity? So if you roll, your dex is poor, you're awkward, you're clumsy. That, again, a lot of comic relief there. Maybe you Raiders a lot out. Um, you can't avoid an area of effect spell, like everybody's ducking out of the way because there's a lightning bolt, and you get hammered with it. You can't control some kind of vehicle, like a cart you're hurtling all like down a mountainside or something. Can't tie up a prisoner properly. You tie up a prisoner, maybe you roll in secret and tell the DM, that didn't work, and the person breaks free. Um, So yeah, I think again it adds a lot more flavor, and it's interesting if the heroes are not superheroes. That's one of the problems with fifth edition is that they do make the players very powerful, um, and there is a lot of superhero kind of gamer. What's the word? I don't even come for that
Like a like an
mentality,
attitude
but
of
like
we're supposed to be rockets. What are we talking about? Yeah, like
yeah, we're gonna crush the game and we're gonna max out our stats, and that's I mean that's a way to play, but that's not really where D&D came from. And I don't think it's as fun if your character is invincible.
well, exactly, because if your character is all powerful, all godlike, then it gets boring very very fast because there's nothing. I mean, unless suddenly the DM's like, okay, God comes down and like starts to smite you, like nothing gets in your way. Like, yeah, that because I think it's old really quickly, which is why
Yeah.
the flaws and things are so important.
All right. So low constitution, what would happen? Well, you'd be you
Oh,
don't function well if you go into
oh, hello. This just in: the internet sucks. This just in: the internet sucks. Oh, did we lose Andrew? Hello. Yep, we lost Andrew. Uh-oh. Well, I'll carry the show then. Yeah, so we're talking about uh what were we on? Low constitution. Come back, Andrew. I can't do this without you. Ah, we'll pause for a moment and I will go and find Andrew. Oh wait, he's back.
hello,
Oh,
hello.
whoops, wrong button. There we go. Hi. You totally vanished.
Hi.
You just disappeared.
I just kept
We were
talking
ta-
for a while.
you were talking about low constitution, and then your internet lost a constitution roll. And
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so maybe swimming would be more swimming and hiking would be more difficult. Um, Dealing with lack of sleep, holding your alcohol, that would make things very interesting. If players have more than a few drinks, I always have them roll a constitution saving throw to see how they're doing. So that can be interesting. Low intelligence, what would happen? Well, you wouldn't know maybe many other languages. You might speak slowly and have a very limited vocabulary. You'd forget details. Maybe you can't figure out puzzles and clues as well. Um, you can't make a good disguise. You can't forge things or win a game of skill at the tavern.
that's actually really important because even I, this so many years on, still have issues of figuring out how to play low intelligence and low wisdom because people kind of treat them as interchangeable.
Hmm.
And having little flaw details like this about if you have you can't do a certain thing, you can't win a
Yeah.
game of skill, uh, that is very different from wisdom. and
Yes.
uh, and it's really important for people to be able to understand how these things work together. But
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. When you get an example of all these abilities, it does help clear, you know, clear the air. And I know these days intelligence is a dump stat a lot of times. So low absent-minded
Yeah.
You don't notice the obvious. Um, you might not do well surviving in the wilderness. You'd have like poor intuition. Maybe
That
you're not good
example I
at.
like, by the way, getting lost in
Oh
the
yeah,
wilderness because of your low wisdom.
yeah. Well, yeah.
Imagine leading the party and being like, oh, the map's upside down.
Yeah, yeah. And you maybe you can't deal with animals very well because wisdom's connected to animal handling. You can't stabilize a dying companion or diagnose an illness. And you might not even be able to tell if a creature is undead or not as part of having a low wisdom score.
Oh, that's. Oh, I love that. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. Oh yeah, Larry's here. He's totally gonna hang out with us in the
Yeah.
pub. Ah!
Well, I actually have two creatures, at least one for sure, maybe two in the new book that are undead, but one of their traits is that it's very hard to tell that they're undead, which I think I really like that idea. Um,
Interesting.
for low charisma, the final ability score, what would happen? Well, you'd be abrasive, inarticulate, you might be timid, you wouldn't get along with other people very well. Maybe you can't persuade them. It's hard to deceive others or intimidate them. You're a terrible performer. You can't get a sense of topics if in the conversation. Like your social skills would be quite poor. Um, just in general, you wouldn't be really good with other humanoids.
I love that about what if you're like a character who uh wants to be like a dancing performer or some sort of skill like that, but their
Yeah,
charisma's in the toilet, and
yeah,
it's like that. Oh, I love that.
yeah. I think that's great. I have had some NPCs like that who are bards and they have terrible charisma. Or you make a character whose background is they were an entertainer, a
Mm.
dancer or a poet or a musician or whatever, and they were terrible. I even had one who was like exiled out of the town, like kicked out of the town, and he was never allowed back just because he was a terrible performer.
I'm sorry, you're so bad. We can't have you here.
Yeah,
Thank you for coming.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And actually, in
So,
the new book, there's a lot more action, even in the text. And so, I many of the monsters are described what would when the party would find them, basically in the dungeon. And one of the sentences begins something like, "The annoying bard was at the back of the party and then noticed." Yeah. So yeah, using the ability scores to show your flaw and play off that just because of luck and random rolls with the dice. That's one way to have a flaw in a character. Here's some other ones that I made up or ones that are from the player's handbook. If you look in the
right.
section for backgrounds, there's flaws in there. Um, so one I like is that they always get into arguments, which I've done quite a bit of, and we have one player in our group who regularly their character is always arguing with NPCs, with monsters, with the rest of the party, and
which makes for some very interesting situations.
it
Like
does, it
like
does,
wow.
yeah. It definitely helps move the story along because something's always going on. Um, greedy is another flaw. Lazy, I actually like that one quite a bit. You're a hero, but you're lazy. Um, aloof is a good one. And actually, we had in our city book, this book right here, we had one character, and there's a NPC monster in there who is lazy, and the whole sewer section, part of the part of that section, all the many of the monsters are tied into laziness. And there's one who's this NPC. And when we did the layout, there was only a horizontal bar at the top of the page when the layout was done. And we could have moved things around, but sometimes you don't. You've got to make do with what you have. And so
Yeah.
Travis was a genius. And what did he do? Because this guy is a lazy loaf, this illusionist named Lothar the Lethargic. He put him lying down. He put him lying down in the book. Um, and he used the space that he got. Usually we can move things around, but in this case, right here,
I love it.
yeah. So lazy, I think that's a great trait for an NPC or player character. Um, Being really aloof, somebody who is really hard on themselves. I think a lot of people understand that these days.
Oh God, yeah.
And I
Oh
think
yeah.
it's a fun one. It's kind of therapeutic in a way to have a character like that. Um, Someone who enjoys their mead too much or their wine is always a classic trope. Um, Somebody who takes humor too far.
Yeah. Been there, done that, watched it happen.
Yeah. Someone who swears like a sailor.
Yeah.
So,
Because you're gonna run into players, or not players, well, players too, but also NPCs that are, hi King, how are you? Oh yes, I'm doing well, Pilgrim. What are you doing? Well,
right.
I gotta tell you, I just got totally, last night at the tavern. I'm sorry, please have him removed.
Well, another funny thing is that in our games we don't have swearing at the table. However, I did have a curse on a player once, which made them swear after every sentence. So they had to figure out a way of swearing but not swearing. So they made up their own words, and they decided to make them medieval.
Oh,
So
interesting.
yeah, it was actually the same player who usually argues with everyone. And it was amazing because it went on for months that they had this curse on their character, months in game time, in real lifetime, I mean. So it went on and on and on. And eventually they were starting to run out of things that they could possibly say. Um, so I think that's a fun one because it actually doesn't have to be swearing. It can be like there's a movie called, I think it's Married to the Mob with who's the guy who was the original Batman?
Oh,
Keaton,
that's
Michael Keaton.
Keaton. Yeah, and
And they
Kathleen
do that in that
Turner.
movie. They have swearing throughout the movie, but they changed it so that it's not they can't basically censor it because they've changed all the words, right?
That is brilliant. I
So they
love it.
say things like "you fargan ice hole" or
Actually, there was a TV show recently that did that. The
"oh
Good
really?"
Place.
They probably got it from there. Or they're like "you
Holy
fargan
fork!
bastages, what are you doing here?" Like it's so good. So you could do that and still not swear and have fun and if you wanted. Um, of course, there's many tables where all it is swearing, and that's fine. Um, Someone who can't keep a secret is interesting. We've had that in our group, and the rest of the party is trying to always shut them up. Um, Someone who's really dogmatic, right? They're very narrow-minded. A coward. Now, again, you have to play some of these right because they could destroy the party in the game.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
if you walk the line of being a hero who's a coward, interesting possibilities, right? Um, Someone who's really egocentric, so they just think the world revolves around them. That's I think that's a really fun character to play. I mean, one of the funnest characters in Harry Potter, not even close, is Gilderoy Lockhart.
Oh, of
Right?
course.
And
Yeah.
he doesn't realize that there's you know billions of people in the world. He thinks there's one. He gives the first thing he does in the school when he starts teaching is he gives the kids a test about himself.
I
Um,
th-
then
didn't he
character
he rolled poorly on his intelligence score later on in that.
he did, yeah. Um, a really arrogant character could cause a lot of issues. Somebody who's a sucker for a pretty face, who's constantly getting charmed by different monsters and NPCs.
I played a character like that. I believe
Yes.
it was Othello, who his
Mhm.
flaw was that he was, I think, looking for love or something. Something forgot exactly what the language was, but yeah.
Yeah.
So you gave me so many opportunities. So
Yes.
anyway, this person's there, and I'm like, I love her, and then off he went, and then
Yeah.
it's like action happens, and then Othello shows up after the fact. Oh, I was sleeping. I had a great time last night. Where oh, suddenly, what? She's a witch? What are you talking about? A
Yeah.
hag? Oh no! Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was brilliant.
His run-in with the hag, that was quite interesting. Um, a character who judges others harshly, someone who's suspicious of strangers, that's a good one because I mean your
Yeah.
game's going to be filled with strangers. Um, somebody who's overconfident, someone who never follows the plan, that's a good one. Someone who is all they're just out for fame and fortune.
Had a character like that too, or at least I think I
Mhm.
was the manager of a character like
Yeah.
that.
Someone who has trouble hiding their feelings. That hasn't been done very much in our groups. I think that's a good one.
That is a good one.
Um, somebody who always assumes the worst of others.
Yep,
That's a good flaw.
I love that one.
Someone who needs to win every argument. That's another. That's another good one. Yeah,
I
and
think
so
I did have a character that does that.
so those are some ones. Many of those are in the player's handbook. Other things you might consider, age could be considered a flaw. Again, a lot of this is subjective, but you could play with it. It's a game. It's for fun. Um, if you have low hit points, that could be a flaw. Maybe that's part of you not being very strong. If your speed is low, like a gnome or a halfling or a dwarf, halfling I think has no they do. I think yeah, dwarf, gnome, and halfling. I think they're all 25 feet if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. So that could be considered a flaw if you're a bit slower. Other kinds of personality quirks, again, very subjective, but maybe like if you twitch all the time or you
Well,
sigh deeply. I remember when I worked with kids for many years. There was this one kid that I worked with who would sigh all the time after every almost every sentence. Like, when is the field trip?
uh,
Is it tomorrow? Like, just classic. So a lot of these little quirks of personality that make us all individuals could be considered a flaw, even though probably it's not. Um,
well, I mean, all of these are like we've had characters where the player decides, okay, well, my character has this flaw where they always attack the undead, or they always
yeah.
go after they need to go and pick that lock for no reason other than they can see it and they become obsessed with it, and they need to do that thing. And all of these things, the flaws are, whatever you want to call them, as you said, move things forward in unexpected ways, which
Yes.
I love because there you could be planning a thing and then a character, the DM's got an idea of what is going to happen in that session. The players know they have to get to a certain point or they have to do a certain thing, and then they have that problem where suddenly a character runs off
Hmm.
or disappears
Hmm.
or gets into a fight with somebody. Like, okay guys, yeah, we're going to go and we're going to do this, and then suddenly you burn down a bar, and
Hmm.
you have all these kinds of weird things that can happen because there's going to be ramifications for all of it where
Hmm.
uh, you hope that your characters are going to get to the, hopefully are going to move forward in the adventure. But
Hmm.
sometimes, some sessions, not so much. You can kind of get lost in that, having to cope with reality in a way. Like
Right.
these characters we play are going to do their own thing. We direct them. We have decisions for them because they're really, But if you're really good at playing a character, establishing a flaw or some sort of thing that they want to do, because things like the first thing in my mind is like a character, say for example, is wanting to support or start an orphanage or something, something along those lines, and that can become their obsession and they can completely focus on that and derail
Hmm.
uh, going to the dungeon or going to the castle or whatever it might be.
Hmm.
And suddenly it's like, we got to get to the city, man. Like, what's going on? But this thing, I need it for the whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, that stuff is just, I love it. It's the juice that makes the steak of D&D so delicious. That was the weirdest analogy. The steak of D&D. Oh my lord.
Yeah, I think, you point out how, the random nature sometimes of it, um, or when that flaw will be exposed and revealed. And yeah, it's very true. You think about video games, which really a lot of these video games that are role-playing games, they all came from D&D. They were all
It's
inspired by
true.
D&D. And you think about how they interact with you when you move around in games, and most of the time you're interacting with NPCs that have flaws, and they're trying to have you interact with the game and the characters or the monsters. And the same thing in D&D, right? Those flaws and those are interesting. And every monster basically has a flaw. Even the Tarask. Um, there's one new one I have in this book, in the dungeon book, the new one that's CR 30, that I really think, actually, if the game had CR above 30, I could probably give it to them, because this thing is pretty much unstoppable. But when you see the book, you realize why. Um, and other than that, like, even every monster has a flaw, and I think it's interesting too if the players and the NPCs have flaws too.
Yeah, and there's going to be flaws that work really well together and flaws that don't. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter which collection you find there, or sorry, not collection, but combination you find. Um, it makes for a very interesting game because I don't know. Sometimes when you're playing well, you brought up video games. You're playing a video game. You need to get from point A to point B. Um, Sometimes that can get a little boring after a while. You kind of really want that sort of, say, I don't know, open world feel. Like, oh, I got to
Yeah.
get over there, but you know what? I'm going to go over there and spend a few days over that way because
Hmm.
I know I need to get there, but maybe I need to get I don't know, the supplies to do the objective or those kinds of things. But having it happen in a more sort of haphazard way can make it funner at the table. Funner. Did I just say funner? It can make it more
Yeah.
enjoyable at the table because you just don't want to roll dice and say, okay, I'm gonna get on a horse and go to the thing, and then we'll
Hmm.
stabby. No, that just gets boring. But if you're gonna get on a horse and that horse breaks a leg, or you don't know how to ride a horse and you fall off and break your leg,
Hmm.
that is just classic stuff.
Hmm.
You have to stay in this small town for the next 2 weeks in game time because you broke your leg and you gotta. Oh, there's no
Right.
healers there either. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the more extreme the flaw, the more like it impacts the game, the more you have to be cognizant that the game still has to move along. You have to, you might have to, it's fine to go up against the boundaries of the game, but again, you can't break it. So you have to consider that, right? You could
Yes,
be a lazy hero to a certain degree, but you're still, that's the game you're still playing. So I know
exactly.
there are some groups. I did DM one group who were so interested in the role playing that I only did this once, thank goodness. But they lost the plot as far as like, what is this game about and what we're doing. They're just going in circles role playing with each other instead of actually being heroes in a medieval fantasy world. Um, so, and again, there's lots of different tables. And so,
Yeah.
in that case, it was a DM that didn't match the group, that's for sure. And I had to basically drag them through the adventure. It was just a one shot, and I definitely wouldn't play with them again, because again, to me, it should be for fun, and that was not a fun game.
And that's the thing. It's just a game, people. Don't forget that. We will repeat it every time we're here because stuff like that. It people can get so involved. I kid you not. There was a game back in the mid '90s where you're like a spacecraft going through a planet, like in tunnels or something. I've forgotten exactly what the game is
Right.
called. And he wrote a strategy guide. It was like 50 pages long about how to play this game because he was that kind of person.
Yeah,
It
yeah, yeah.
wasn't enough for him just to kind of flip open the manual and be like, "Oh, okay, so I press down, I go up the turn. Okay, great." No, he was like, "Oh no, there's way more to this game," and I played the game and I was like, this game's kind of boring." But nope, he gave me the manual. He's like, "You have to read this and you get to know the game better." And I'm like, "Okay," but I'm still a friend with him. it
Mhm.
was it was just one of those moments. Like there's a character trait law that
Yeah.
some people might go, "That's a little weird, dude." But as you said, there's all kinds of tables.
Yes, there are.
That we should put that on a T-shirt. Um, anything else? Any little more bits of wisdom for flaws in characters, or do you feel like
Again,
we've talked
like
enough?
we're really focusing today talking about player characters, but when I make non-player characters, I include this as well. Um, and in these monster books, all those NPCs and monsters, they all have flaws, they all have weaknesses, they're not perfect, um, and yeah, I think it makes a more interesting game and fun game, and that's what playing is for, to have fun. So.
Exactly, and that's the whole point. If we don't, if people forget it's a game, then it just becomes like any other day at the office, and it's like, no, we don't want that. We are here to do something so incredibly different
Mhm,
that leave the real world outside because that's where it belongs. We're here at this table to do something fun and hopefully have people bond as characters and bond as human beings as well.
mhm,
At least that's how I look at it. But
mhm.
there's all kinds of tables. I'd be like, God, that's got to go on a shirt. Anyway, um, thank you all for watching and or listening. We of course have an audio version of the show, which all the links for all of that will be down below. And tell people about the show because if you think we're cool, we'll think you're cool. If you're telling people about it, we'll think you're even cooler. So please get out there and spread the word. And also send us stuff. Send us not stuff, questions, information, anything you'd like to know or you'd like us to talk about. Do let us know because Andrew is very good. I tell you right now, I'm looking at our notes here. Yeah, there's probably another 12, 20, 1,500 episodes Andrew's just already written out that we're going to talk about. So we gotta split those up, man. We want to get some other people's opinions and things like that and telling us what we should be doing because we're just puppets or something. I don't know what I'm talking about. Again, thank you all for listening. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Later.